This video is sponsored by EA. Valkyrie is the call sign of Kairi Imahara, the daughter of infamous Apex Predator pilot Viper. If you're a Titanfall fan, you're going to love Valkyrie.
Valkyrie's got you in the pipe, 5x5.
And if you love movement legends like Horizon, Octane and Pathfinder, you're going to love Valkyrie even more.
Box 3, visual clear, good tone.
Today I wanted to showcase Valkyrie's abilities, give some tips and tricks to get you started on your first few days of playing, and some overall suggestions of how to play her in both Arena mode and Battle Royale. First, let's take a look at her abilities, because there is a lot going on. You know how some legends sort of have a passive that isn't really much of an ability at all? Like Crypto's passive could just be a part of his tactical, so you feel sort of robbed in a way. Well, it seems like we found the legend who has stolen everybody's passive power, because Valkyrie has 3 passive abilities. Let's talk about the first 2 quickly. Valkyrie has the Recon passive, so she can scan survey beacons, and she also has this unique UI when skydiving, either from the jump ship, a balloon, or any other way. This UI will highlight nearby players for her and her team, but these players must be in Valkyrie's line of sight. The third of which is definitely the most impactful, and it's going to be the reason you'll want to play Valkyrie. She has a jetpack, and yep, it's part of her passive. When you jump in the air with Valkyrie, you'll activate her VTOL jet, which will allow you to rise into the air. You can move in all directions when using the VTOL jet and quickly boost in different directions by turning off the jetpack and activating it again. I'll get into more tips for it soon, but let's first look at the biggest drawbacks of this ability, because well, if the devs didn't build in some weaknesses, it's safe to say Valkyrie would be instantly the most powerful legend in the game. Firstly, your mid-air movement is nothing like launch day Horizon. You are pretty easy to hit in the air, so you have to really think carefully about how and when to use the VTOL jet. You can't just go in the air and strafe back and forth crazily like Horizon could. It's more of a quick and powerful repositioning tool than anything else. Secondly, unlike Horizon's gravity lift, the VTOL jets are really loud, so you won't be sneaking up on anybody with it. Also, you have limited fuel for the jets. When you activate the jet, it uses a big chunk of fuel, and as you continue to use them, the fuel slowly goes down. Run out of fuel and you'll fall out of the sky. The fuel slowly recharges whilst on the ground though. Finally, you cannot use weapons whilst mid-air with the VTOL jet. You have to deactivate the jet, and there is a short delay before you can fire again. So mid-air shots are possible, but only if you're really high up already, and probably very vulnerable. So you can see there are tons of drawbacks to the VTOL jet, and it's thanks to these that Valkyrie won't be overpowered or frustrating to play against. In fact, I think the Valkyrie will have a pretty steep learning curve, and it'll take some practice to use her jets effectively. One thing you can do whilst using your jets is use Valkyrie's tactical. Her tactical is called Missile Swarm. It's an adapted version of North Star's Flight Core. It fires out 12 missiles in a grid. Anybody caught in the grid will be damaged 25 to 40 damage, and they will be slowed. It's going to be powerful to catch people out in the open, force players out of cover, or create a stunning effect you can create a push off of. To me, the Missile Swarm ability is like a far greater fuse tactical. You can see here how the stun effect works. It's like a slightly weaker arc star effect. Finally, let's talk about Valkyrie's ultimate. Skyward Jump allows Valkyrie and any team members that choose to join her to shoot up in the sky and reposition as if they have used a redeploy balloon. It takes some time to charge up, so you'll need to do it somewhere safe, otherwise you'll just be shot. The ultimate will be cancelled and you'll lose your ult charge. I see this being a really powerful repositioning tool for the whole team that's going to help you get out of some very sticky situations. So that explains all of Valkyrie's abilities, but how can we use her to her best potential? I've been able to play her for quite a few hours already, so I've come up with a bunch of tips you'll be able to take into battle. I first want to talk about the quick movement potential Valkyrie's VTOL jets give you. Every time you activate the jet, you'll get a boost in speed. It uses a lot of fuel, but it can be more effective to quickly activate and deactivate the jet sometimes, instead of just trying to fly around in the air for too long. The best way I could describe it is you'll be like a fly zipping back and forth when doing this, as opposed to say a slow floating butterfly when you keep the jetpack activated mid-air. This speed boost can work like a tap strafe on easy mode. You can quickly change your movement direction mid-air whilst keeping a high level of speed. You can see here how it could be really effective to bamboozle players. When you're flying, you can also choose to switch from direct flight to level. Level has a bit more air strafing control, but really you'll probably be using direct flight most of the time. You can also change the jetpack activation from toggle to hold in the settings menu. I've had other creators say that you may want to do hold if you want to still have access to advanced movements such as wall jumping and bunny hopping. For me though, I found either worked. The only thing you have to keep in mind is that with Valkyrie you can wall jump, but the timing has to be perfect, otherwise you'll just start flying instead of bouncing off of the wall. One thing you can do is quickly activate the jets before touching the ground. It can cancel the stun animation that happens when you fall from a large height. Do it at the right height and you'll cancel the stun, but still have enough time in the air to pull out your weapon before you touch the ground. Because you cannot use your weapon straight away, I think you really need to think ahead about how you will use your VTOL jet. If you want to be aggressive with it, it seems best to fly into cover with it so you have some time to re-equip your weapon. If you want to reposition with it, your first thought should be to use the jetpack to lose line of sight of your enemies as fast as possible, whether that means flying onto a roof, behind a building, or around cover. If you just fly up in the sky and try to fly away, you'll just get shot down very easily. It's easier to shoot a mid-air Valkyrie than a mid-air jump pad player in my opinion. One really important thing to take into consideration is the tactical and passive work really well together, so if you want to get the most out of the tactical, you should use it whilst hovering. And the first reason is because when you're in the air, you have a sort of overhead view of the enemies, and the sort of way the missiles spread out, it's more designed to be fired from an overhead view. If there's any terrain in the way, it's still going to be on target when you're flying overhead. So this is definitely something to keep in mind. The second neat thing about using the tactical and the passive together is that when you hold down the tactical button mid-air and you don't fire it, you're going to be able to float there for much longer. You can move left and right a little bit, you're moving very slowly, but your fuel usage comes down to an almost halt, so you can stay in the air for a very long time. I don't really know what gameplay benefits this is going to bring, but you may be able to do some cool things with it, and it's a nice little trick. Another cool thing is that the higher you are in the air with the jetpack, the further you're going to be able to fire the missile swarm. Go really high and you're going to be able to throw it like Fuse can throw a grenade. It's really cool. And you can use these things on the ground and in buildings, but they're really hard to use. One example could be, let's say there's someone in a corner in the room. You could just blanket the wall in front of you and that could work pretty well. But one little drawback is that if there's not enough height above you, they won't be able to activate. The tactical just won't work. It needs some above head clearance. Now let's take a look at Valkyrie and ziplines, because some interesting stuff can happen. Valkyrie can touch a zipline whilst hovering to instantly equip her weapon. On top of this, if she jetpacks into a zipline, attaches to the zipline and jumps off, you can go much further, but you have this weird floating effect, so you'll likely be an easy target, but it could be the potential for some crazy movement plays. I find that double tapping jump mid-air with jetpack on toggle can be a really easy way to shift your momentum mid-air. If you press a movement direction at the same time as you tap to activate the jetpack, you'll boost in that direction. One of the devs made a comment stating that they're worried Valkyrie will be overpowered at launch, and it makes sense after seeing what releasing a high mobility legend like Horizon did to the meta. I'd argue that Valkyrie isn't overpowered like Horizon was at launch. Unlike Horizon, the devs have put in some very meaningful features to keep the jetpack from being overpowered. The fuel use, the inability to use weapons, and limited air strafing is all something I touched on earlier. These things alone will be enough to keep Valkyrie reined in, so to speak. I really don't think she'll suddenly become the best legend in Apex like Horizon did, and will more likely be released somewhere in the higher end of performance, but not OP. She has mobility, so inherently she has a great chance to be highly picked and played, and will have a very decent engagement rate, but it will take some skill, practice, and careful planning in the middle of hectic fights to actually use the jetpack to outplay opponents. It's not as easy as just throwing a grapple or using a gravity lift anywhere, because you have to play around the fact that you're going to be unable to use your weapon for a short time. It's obviously hard to predict how she'll be balanced with such little playtime, but I'll say this for certain: fighting a Valkyrie is no way near as frustrating as fighting a launch day Horizon or a Caustic at his peak, so I think she'll mostly be welcomed by the Apex community. Finally, let's talk about arenas. I think that it's harder to use Valkyrie effectively in arenas because the enemy team is constantly going to be on the lookout for you. As soon as you leave cover, you're potentially going to be in somebody's line of sight. For that reason, it's really advised not to use the jetpack that often and use it for quick repositioning. The ultimate also works a little differently in arenas. You can skydive faster and move a shorter distance simply because the arena maps are smaller, so an adjustment had to be made to make it fit in the available maps. For now, that's all I have for Valkyrie. Quite a lot considering considering I've only played her for a few hours. I think give it a couple weeks and players are going to get really good with her and push her to her full potential. I don't think she's as overpowered as the devs are worrying, but I do think she's going to be a pretty decent legend. I hope you learned a few things and are just as excited as me to go play Valkyrie in Season 9. Leave your thoughts below and I'll see you in the comments. Cheerio!